I tried to be on brand today with like my look, but I don't know. This I think looks weird with a t-shirt. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today we have my second in a series of 5 videos discussing my favorite books of all time. As I said in my previous video, I decided to do it this way because if you've been around here for a while, you know I tend to ramble, and as I have 12 all-time favorite books, the tippy top favorite, awesomest, best book of all time in my opinion, I knew that that would be like a lot to talk about, and I wouldn't be able to fit that into a video that wasn't like super duper long. So last time I talked about my favorite fantasy novel of all time and my favorite graphic novel of all time. Yes, I do realize that a graphic novel is not a genre, but that's how I grouped it. Today we are discussing 3 of my all-time favorite novels that happen to be horror books. So I just reread these books this month. That's actually why this video is a little bit late, because I just wanted to make sure that I had finished my notes. I wanted to make sure to have notes and have notations and just be sure that I can really try to articulate why these are my all-time favorites. Like, what puts them up there above like everything else that I say, oh my god, I love that, oh my god, that's one of my favorites. Like, yeah. So the first book I think that we'll talk about is The Shining by Stephen King. So you have probably heard me talk about this book ad nauseum. I love it, but right now this is my favorite Stephen King book. One of my favorite books. You can tell it's a little bit worn down. I annotated it last year, and that's about the time when I decided that I wanted to annotate all of my favorite books, because I just felt like I got so much more out of it by doing this than I had reading it previously. If you don't know, The Shining is following the Torrance family, Jack, Wendy, and Danny, as they head up to the Overlook Hotel in Colorado. This is basically a last-ditch effort of a possible career saver for Jack, who is a recovering alcoholic who has just been fucking up his life over the past several years, and also him taking his wife Wendy, as they are slowly kind of rebuilding their relationship, and their 5-year-old son Danny, who is a bit special. Danny's got some talents, and unfortunately up at the Overlook there are some terrible forces up at the Overlook who are extremely interested in Danny and his talents. So don't mind me if I'm looking over here, because I wrote extensive notes. So this book, like, creeped me the hell out the first time I read it. I'd watched the movie prior to reading this. It was actually the reason I wanted to read this when I was in college, I think, because I'd seen the movie when I was in high school. It creeped the hell out of me. On my second read through, I ended up getting a little bit more out of it. I understood a bit more like why I enjoyed it so much, besides like the creepiness. And after annotating it last year, I was really able to basically break it down more succinctly. Like, what makes me count this among my all-time favorite books. And that was like my 5th or 6th reread, I want to say. I have been basically rereading this annually in October or November for the past like 4 or 5 years. I can basically break this down into 3 major reasons why this is up there. I like my favorites. The first of which is the way the hotel is written about, like it's its own sentient entity. Parts of the Overlook are described in like very animalistic terms. The boiler makes Jack think of a giant dozing cat. When Dick Halloran, the cook who teaches Danny about the shine, because he also shines, his impression of the Torrances disappearing inside the Overlook was like that the Overlook had basically swallowed them, almost like it was a giant mouth. The hotel's elevator itself is described as a mouthful of giant teeth. And wasps and their stings are also brought up multiple times. There's like 2 scenes of wasp attacks, and there's also like their poison being referenced in other like high stress moments, like with involved with childish like irrational fears of Danny and the fact that life always seems to be singing Jack. Or rather, he tends to stick his fist right into a wasp nest depending on the situation and his actions and reactions. The hotel itself seems to bring out the most based, like, animalistic behaviors in humans. As is quoted a few times in here, this inhuman place makes human monsters. My absolute favorite quote, though, describing the hotel is the following, which is like right after the last person leaves the Overlook and the Torrances are like left alone there finally. They watched until the car was out of sight, headed down the eastern slope. When it was gone, the 3 of them looked at each other for a silent, almost frightened moment. They were alone. Aspen leaves whirled and skittered in aimless packs across the lawn that was now neatly mowed and tended for no guest's eyes. There was no one to see the autumn leaves steal across the grass but the 3 of them. It gave Jack a curious shrinking feeling, as if his life force had dwindled to a mere spark while the hotel and the grounds had suddenly doubled in size and become sinister, dwarfing them with sullen, inanimate power. And that kind of idea, as they're like this tiny bit of like light in this overwhelming darkness and the shadowed halls, like that kind of imagery is like in here. It's referenced quite a bit, but that initial part of it just is, I think it sets the tone for further things that happen continuing on through the novel. Second thing I really love about this book is the creep factor. Stephen King is the master of horror. Like, not only the grisly details, like images Danny sees of bad things that happened at the Overlook in the past, but also like little subtle horrors. Like, did something move there that shouldn't have? Are there more shadows in this hallway than there should be? Why is the hair on the back of my neck standing up on end like somebody is watching me when I know that I'm the only one in this room? Like, those little unsettling bits that most people have probably felt at some point or multiple points in their lives, like, I think they scare just a little bit more than the outright grotesque sometimes, because the outright grotesque is like shocking. There's a certain level of like shock value to it, and can also be pretty horrifying, especially if you have a good imagination. But I think those little subtle things are almost more scarier. Like, that's the shit that stays with you. That's the stuff that you remember at 2 a.m. when you woke up for like no reason, and then you think you hear like a creak in the hallway. Because those little subtle things, those little things out of the corner of our eye or questioning stuff, like, that's something that I think everybody's experienced at some point in their life. So that's, I think, what makes it a little more scary, is you can relate more to it. I also really enjoy King's like little childhood things that he throws in often, like pop culture stuff, song lyrics, things from commercials. Sometimes it's colloquialisms or like language related to childish like speech quirks, certain catchphrases. Oftentimes it's like irrational childhood fears, like just the totally irrational childhood fears. Like, these details are something I really enjoy, but I also think it ramps up the creep factor quite a bit because like kids are creepy. I've heard some stories from friends who were parents that just kids are kind of inherently creepy when they're little sometimes. And I know that I definitely creeped out my parents when I was a kid. But also, like, I don't know about the rest of you, but I was pretty much a giant coward as a child. Like, I was scared of the dark, was convinced Dracula lived in my closet, fairly certain something tentacly or evil was gonna reach out from under my bed and grab me. I'd have nightmares about the most randomest stuff. Like, my parents did not allow me to watch Nightmare Before Christmas growing up. Like, I didn't see it until I was in high school because they knew that I'd probably have nightmares from it. Some of the shit that scared me as a kid still scares the shit out of me. Like, I haven't been able to finish watching, I've watched a couple of episodes, but I can't make it all through the series. It's called So Weird, and it's like this older show that I think might have been on like Disney or something. I caught random episodes of it growing up, and it scared the crap out of me, and I still can't manage to finish this series because it's still a little bit scary, and it's like, that was terrifying to a child. That shouldn't be scary as an adult, but it still kind of is. What I mean is, like, some of the things that formerly terrified me don't hold much of a creep factor for me now as a grown-ass adult, but I still remember vividly how those things made me feel at the time. So when Danny is like irrationally freaking out about the old-fashioned fire hose in this corner of like one of the hallways in the overlook, and he thinks it resembles a giant snake that probably wants to bite him, or maybe is full of wasps. He suddenly decides, oh my god, it's not just full of poison, it's full of wasps. Like, it sounds kind of stupid, but at the same time, like, I can remember vividly standing at the end of a dimly lit hallway, super convinced that that thing illuminated in the dark bedroom at the end of the hall, like that thing that I can see, is a monster's eyeball or its fangs. And definitely not anything, you know, as mundane as like a vase or a glass change jar or anything. And I can recall how much my heart like hammered away and how sweaty my palms felt once I'd convinced myself that Dracula was standing right next to my bed and just waiting for me to loosen my grip on the blanket tucked around me so he could like rip it back and drain me of blood. Like, I remember how those things made me feel, even though that doesn't really scare me anymore. I remember how I felt when I was 5, 6, 8, 10 even. I haven't experienced those fears in like so long, but I remember them clearly. And considering how he is the king of horror, I imagine that it's not just me who reads King's books and finds that he's tapped into like those terrible shadows of childhood and makes us believe in the boogeyman again. I've read this book like so much, and the only part that still 100% freaks me out, like the part that I was continuing my reread at nighttime and I had to pause and take it up again in the daylight, are the scenes in room 217, or if you're a fan of the movie, room 237. It's fucking grotesque and horrifying, and something about the description just taps into this long forgotten like childhood fear of mine, and I cannot. King is like really good at either being in your face with the scary but also with the subtle. This quote about the beginning of them being snowbound, it's like the storm has descended, the big one basically. So they went in together, leaving the wind to build to the low-pitched scream that would go on all night, a sound they would get to know well. Flakes of snow swirled and danced across the porch. The overlook faced it as it had for nearly 3/4 of a century, its darkened windows now bearded with snow, indifferent to the fact that it was now cut off from the world. Or possibly it was pleased with the prospect. Inside its shell, the three of them went about their early evening routine, like microbes trapped in the intestine of a monster. This just reminded me of how Shirley Jackson describes Hill House. It's so beautiful, and I think sets a great, like, creepy tone for the rest of the book, just continuing on with that very eerie feeling Actually, there's such a vibe of Shirley Jackson in here. It's like, you know darn well how much King was probably influenced by Hell House, I think. And also, of course, by the Stanley Hotel when he visited it and based the Overlook off of. The third thing that I really love about this book, which I think also brings it up there as being like a major favorite of mine, is like the heart of the book, which has more to do with like facing or succumbing to your own inner demons, as well as like basically a family drama, like family tragedy, family drama. Each member of the Torrance family is like dealing with their inner demons when they come to the Overlook. Danny, maybe not so much. He's only 5, but he is dealing with fear of losing his mind, or people thinking he's losing his mind because of his shining. He also has a strong fear of his parents getting divorced because he knows that it's things that they thought about in the past. He's also afraid of being kind of torn between them. Wendy is dealing with some mommy issues, i.e. having the shittiest mother. She's also dealing with an alcoholic husband who previously hurt their son, and she's still wondering if she's made and is still making the right choices for her and for Danny. Jack is a royal fuck up. Like, some of the things that he has done is 100% his fault. The rest is probably due to like unresolved trauma from his childhood and the fact that he apparently has never been to therapy. But like, this book is set in the 1970s. That wasn't really a major thing that a lot of people like did, so that tracks for the time period. He's a recovering alcoholic. He has a wicked temper, a sense of self-importance and narcissism that is tied up also with a huge dose of like self-loathing and self-pity. So shit's complicated. And he also has some underlying like misogyny crap that it might be the time period, but I think is probably mostly due to the fact that his dad was a giant abusive douche canoe. Jack has a lot of inner demons that he drags up to that mountaintop. The thing is the Overlook is not a place to escape from that. It's a place that takes all the negativity in and allows it to grow and fester and eventually sting you. Jack is not so great at facing his inner demons, and the hotel knows that, which ultimately is what makes this book both a horror tale and this major like family drama. So I'm an only child, and while I'm close to both of my parents, I'm most definitely a daddy's girl. My dad and I do not have not even close to the same relationship as like Jack and Danny, but I do know what it's like to place your parents up on this high like pedestal as a young kid. Which, I mean, my parents are pretty great, but they're also flawed human beings, and so am I. We're all flawed humans just trying, just making shit up as we go along and trying our best, and hoping things don't go too badly. And being an only child at like a young age like that, it can feel like your folks are your whole world. And as you get older and your parents consequently get older, there's a feeling of responsibility that's like placed solely on your shoulders. Not that like preparing for the future as an adult with your elderly parents is like a 5-year-old like feeling like he has to protect his parents against a evilly haunted hotel. But I guess maybe there's like similar kind of emotions tapped in there somewhere. In case you haven't noticed before, I like psychology, and I probably spend way too much time thinking about what makes other people tick and trying to understand what makes me tick and why I personally feel some type of way about certain things, especially about what makes certain books stand out for me. So when I'm probably reading way too much into why I'm emotionally connecting with a traumatic story about a haunted hotel, alcoholism, and a potential familicide, I'm just trying to understand why I'm connecting with this story when my small family unit was and is a lot less traumatic and crazy than this one. Maybe it's because of the slim connection I made with, like I said, about feeling responsible. Maybe because I see how things could have gone for my family unit if we had different life situation and personalities and family stuff. Maybe because I can connect with little pieces of each of the Torrances, like bad and good parts, and kind of understand them a little bit. And maybe just because I really love how Stephen King can make me feel such a roller coaster of emotions in like one good story. I don't have it 100% figured out, but this thing makes me creeped out and laugh and disgusted, and even makes me tear up at a few parts. Like there's one part in particular that I cannot get through reading it without just crying. So it's on this favorites list, and I have read it annually, like I said, for the past 4 or 5 years, and I imagine I probably will continue to do so until, I don't know, until I feel like I don't want to. Yeah. So the next two are slightly lighter, maybe not as scary or intense, because they're both middle grade books, but they're also eerie. They got some shit going on. My next all-time favorite book is Small Spaces by Catherine Arden. This is a book following Ollie. She is in the 6th grade. She has been having a rough year. Her mom died in an accident the previous year, and Ollie and her dad have just been trying to, get along. She's pretty much like mostly isolated herself for the most part due to her grief, and one day on her way home from school, she encounters a strange woman trying to throw a book away in a river, and she steals that book and finds that it is called Small Spaces, and it is a book that warns of a man, a very creepy guy called the Smiling Man, and the only way to avoid him is basically to keep to the small spaces. The next day, when she is on a field trip to a local farm with her class, she starts to find that the people in the book that she's been reading were real people. And when the bus breaks down on their way back to school, creepy things start happening. Something is basically coming for the 6th grade class. So this book just hits different. So it being set in Vermont was a delight to me, because I love finding books that are set there, since that's where I grew up. That's a tiny bit of what I really love about this, but it's not really one of the big reasons. I also broke that down into like 3 elements basically of what makes it an all-time fave. The first of which are like the horror in here. Creepy, definitely. It mentions in the synopsis, so it's not really like a synopsis on here. I didn't mention it, but it's not really a spoiler, but an abundance of scarecrows. They are a terrifying element to this story. So if you have an issue with those, oh boy. Like, I grew up in the country, and the Scarecrow is like my favorite character from Wizard of Oz, but ever since a certain Doctor Who episode that I saw several years ago, like, that shit ain't set right with me since. Actually, I can honestly blame Doctor Who for a lot of very mundane things that I'm now irrationally scared of, which, if you're a fan, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but that's another story. So the scarecrows in here are scary as hell, so if you're already uneasy about them, you're in for a treat. Even if you're not, this book will give you pause next time you are, say, at a corn maze and you turn a corner and there's like one of these like hay-filled assholes just staring at you in the dark with his painted on smile. Yeah. There are a couple of other like truly nightmarish parts in the book as well, which I won't go into detail about as they're kind of spoilers, but they add to the never-ending nightmare feel of this book. Like, it feels like there's unsettling bits in every chapter, some real and some like overactive imagination. stuff. Keep in mind, this is like a middle grade horror. So like the scares are ultimately lighter than a King or a Lovecraft or a Barker. Yeah, for an adult maybe it's not so scary. For a middle grade, it's definitely scary. Like I would hold this up here with Goosebumps, or actually maybe between Goosebumps and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You know, the one with the terrifying like drawings. But there is just a lot more going on in this book than just like bumps in the night. The other element I really love of this is the relationships between people in here. The friendships formed in this book just warm my heart, as did the relationship between Ollie and her dad. Ollie has, like I said, she's closed herself off in the past year due to grief. Her dad and her love each other, of course, but she is like, she is closed off. She's trying to avoid grief and memories. She's hiding kind of by herself and in books. She's trying not to move forward, but this also means that she shoved away friends and stopped being a part of activities that she once loved. So being thrust together in a crazy, scary, like totally weird situation with her classmates Brian and Coco makes Ollie have to rely on others to learn more about them, to find out that people are still interesting and worth getting to know. There's a couple of quotes about this that I really love. So one of them, I'll pull it up here. You might get to know characters in books, Ollie thought, but getting to know a human was an entirely different thing. Her mom's voice was lodged in her brain too deeply to be forgettable. You were rude, Olivia, said her mother's voice. You judged him, and he didn't deserve it. It's true. It's honestly something that I think we all do. I know I do. Everybody does, I'm sure, is you judge people in kind of face value and not really getting to know them first. A lot of the times everybody makes like assumptions and stuff like that about other people, and it's really hard to kind of get out of that mindset. Ollie and her dad also have like the sweetest relationship. Like he's like your typical goofy dad. He's loving and silly, and he's full of like really bad dad jokes, but he's also dealing with the loss of his wife and trying to figure out how to be there and help his young daughter cope, and not really knowing how. I really liked this scene with them. He is basically, they're eating breakfast and he's getting ready to like take her to school. He thought for a minute. What did the frog say about the book? Dunno, Ollie said distractedly, still thinking about small spaces. Read it, said her dad, making frog noises. Read it. Ollie groaned. And then what did the chicken say? Asked her dad, looking pleased with himself. Ollie put her head in her books. Book, 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 said her dad, making clucking noises. Ollie cracked a tiny smile. It's silly. It's silly. There's this one's too. What's the difference between a cat and a comma? Dad. Well, I don't know what. Her dad grinned. A comma, he informed her, is a pause at the end of a clause. Ollie saw where this was going. Dad. But a cat, her dad finished blithely, has claws at the end of its paws. He busted up laughing, and Ollie snorted despite herself. That was better than usual. It's so silly, and I kind of love it, and he calls her Ollie Pop in front of everyone, and that's embarrassing, and it's like, it's just, I don't know, it's just, the whole thing is kind of just heartwarming to me, and just silly. Also, her dad bakes and cooks and knits and makes the tastiest sounding food, and he's like trying, and he is honestly one of my all-time favorite fictional dads. Like, he is up there, top 5, actually not even top 5, he's in the top 2 of my favorite fictional dads of all time. Like, I just adore him. And then the last part of this book that I really loved, which I think elevates it into like the top book for me, which might sound weird because it's like the sad stuff, but the bits with Ollie like dealing with her grief, like that just ripped my heart open and sewed it up again. There's a passage in here where Ollie, like, she's been thinking about memories. Like, she's getting ready for the day and she's thinking about memories. And this particular passage, he's gone down to get breakfast. And she's getting oatmeal, and she's putting things into her oatmeal. Like a lot of cream and maple syrup. And it says, Ollie had helped tap the trees for syrup herself the winter before. This is the last batch of syrup they had all made together. Mom and her tapping, and her dad keeping the big pot boiling for days on end. Don't think about that either. Like that sentence, or that like couple of sentences, it's not, I know it's not like much, but like that just hit a certain way with me. So I feel like I'm just oversharing in these videos, but I mentioned in my previous video that like, so I was pretty close with all my grandparents when I was growing up, but one of my grandmas was almost like a second mom to me, and she passed away several years ago, and I miss her every single day. This passage about the syrup, like, it's an overshare probably, but my grandma was a pretty great cook. Like, she made all kinds of delicious things, and some of the very delicious things she made were pickles. Not like your normal pickles. She pickled green tomatoes and garlic and dilly beans, which dilly beans, if you don't know, are dill pickled green beans. They were spicy and tangy and crisp and just the absolute best. I have tried to replicate them and I almost got them right, but not exactly. And I can like remember very clearly how long the last jar she'd given me sat in my fridge at my first apartment after I moved down here. Like, I'd eaten almost all of the beans before she passed, and there was like a couple left in there, and that jar basically sat in there for months, until basically I was moving soon, and I basically just sat down on my floor in front of the fridge one night and I ate the last bean. Maybe I'm reading like too much into it or something, but like the last something from someone you've lost, whether it's the last cookie, the last voicemail, the last letter, the last photo, the last thing they touched, or the last dilly bean that they made and saved for you because they knew how much you love them. It's really hard to let those go. And it's also really hard to think about the last thing or the last time you did something with them that you are now no longer going to do that thing with them ever again. I feel like Catherine Arden was able to like tap into the many forms that like grief takes. Not only the most obvious things like the extreme sadness and avoidance and rage and just the bargaining, you know, the 7 steps. But she's also able to tap into like the subtle little quirks that grief just dumps on you too. You know, just weird little things. Not wanting people to call you a version of your name because that's what this one person called you. Wearing a broken watch because it belonged to them. I don't know if I'm making this sound kind of melancholic because it's really not. Ollie is dealing with a lot, but over the course of the book, she can try to start to move forward. And I think that's part of what makes this such a beautiful book to me, because it's sad, but it's also comforting. And I think that it handles tough things so well for kids to digest or to find comfort in themselves. This book overall just has a great balance of horror and heart, and the quotes just... Alright, let me share a couple more with you because I have to. I don't think this is like a major spoiler, it's just a scene that's like somewhere in the book. Ollie's like thinking about something. Her and her mom, she's remembering a memory of her and her mom walking through the woods and finding on a tree chicken of the woods, which is a mushroom that is apparently extremely tasty, but is also a sign that that particular tree is a goner. That night they feasted on chicken fried wild mushroom with mashed potatoes. Afterward, Ollie and her mom swam in the freezing creek and ate homemade ice cream. It was the best of days, but when Ollie's mom came to tuck her in that night, she found Ollie crying. "Olivia, are you okay?" she asked. "Does your tummy hurt?" Ollie shook her head. "I'm sad for the tree where the mushroom came from. It doesn't seem fair they gave us the best and yummiest mushroom, and now it's just going to die." She buried her face in her pillow. That was back when she could cry over dumb things like elm trees. Her mother sighed and said, "No, it's not fair. But the tree gave us a gift. Even bad things can lead to good. Maybe in sad times, it helps to think of that." This one, I loved this one. It's describing Ollie's house. It was tall and lupine purple and old. The first time Ollie's mom saw it, she said to Ollie's dad, "Who are you, the Easter Bunny?" Because her dad had painted the house the colors of an Easter egg, and ever since they'd called the house the Egg. The outside had plum-colored trim and a bright red door. The kitchen was green like mint ice cream. The bedrooms were sunset orange and candy pink and fire red. Dad liked colors. "Why have a great kitchen if you can have a green one?" he would ask. And that is, that's pretty much how I feel about colors in a house too, as you can probably tell from the photos I've shared of what I've painted the future library downstairs. There's more quotes that I absolutely adore that make me feel all types of things, but I can't share them because they'd probably be spoilers, and I think that you should read this book, so I don't want to give any spoilers. I find this book to not only be like deliciously creepy, but a little funny, with beautiful descriptions and something comforting in its passages, even when it definitely 100% makes me cry. I recommend this book basically any time of year, but I think it's pretty perfect around now too. Yeah, love this. It's still... I've completed the series, and this is still my favorite book out of the series. The last book I have to talk about is another middle grade, and it is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. So this book is following a young boy named Nobody Owens. He is being raised in a graveyard. Basically, when he was a toddler, a man came into his household and killed his parents and his older sister, and he was able to escape into the nearby graveyard, and the entities in the graveyard took him in, gave him the protection of the graveyard, and have kept him safe and have tried to raise him. But meanwhile, outside of the graveyard, danger still is lurking because the man who murdered his biological family really desperately wants to finish the job. Neil Gaiman and Tim Burton, that like they just need to team up and turn this into a movie. Like, this is screaming for a stop motion film to be made out of it. Like, it needs it. Seriously. Like I said, this is also a middle grade book. It's definitely a little more melancholic and spooky than Small Spaces. But of course this book has a lot more, I guess, to reflect on like life and death and the almost in between that Bod lives in here. So this is a reimagining of Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. I have actually never actually read The Jungle Book. I think I remember attempting when I was a kid, like finding the book at the library and like picking it up and reading the first 2 pages, and I was like, this is really boring, and I put it back. So I've never gone back to it. I do think I want to check it out at some point though. But I've watched like 3 different film adaptations of it. Yeah, I've never actually read it, but with the film adaptations, I guess I basically got the gist of it. I couldn't tell you for sure which character is supposed to represent whom for 100%. I mean, Bod is obviously Mowgli. The Owenses are the wolves who adopt him. I'm guessing that Silas, who is his not ghost but not human guardian, his mysterious guardian, I'm guessing he is possibly, he's not goofy enough to be Baloo, so I'm guessing he is supposed to possibly be Bagheera, I'm assuming. So the little bits that I know from them, that's all I really know. I couldn't tell you how creepy that book is, but this one is in many ways, which is something that I really enjoyed about this. One of the things that I really love, which put this up there as one of my favorites, is like the lore and the legends that are like woven into this book. Bod is raised by the people of the graveyard and is also taught like ghostly things by them, like dream walking, fading, phasing, causing fear, haunting, or visitation. He also has the protection of the graveyard, like I said, which allows him to see in the dark. The cold doesn't really bother him that much. He's able to enter tombs with no problem. He can see all the ghosts. Living people don't tend to notice him too much unless he like really draws attention to himself or if they're looking for him specifically. I really like the idea of this kid being taught lessons by ghosts about how to be a ghost, basically. It's kind of funny, and also it's pretty cool, and he does end up putting it to good use later on. Other lore within here involves there being like a barrow behind a tomb, which I think it's like got treasure and some ancient thing within it, which I think might be a reference to possibly the Picts. The Picts meant like the ancient peoples, so I think I could be wrong about it, but it's basically like old-timey people back in the day of the Druids is what this is a reference to. Bod's guardian Silas is also like not a ghost but not living, and he resides in the graveyard. He lives in the abandoned chapel there. Then there is also the Grey Lady, who is this mysterious figure in a cobweb dress riding a giant like gray horse, and she shows up every now and again. There's a couple of legends that I'm guessing that the Grey Lady is like a take on, which is pretty cool. A lot of the things that Gaiman references in here, like some of it actually is historical stuff, and then others seems like he's just taking certain legends and things and he was weaving them into like his own fairy tale almost, kind of similar I guess to the lore and stuff that he was creating around like the ocean at the end of the lane, which I know is one of his polarizing books, but it's got that kind of feel to it of him making his own kind of myths and legends, which I also really loved, and I found the world created here very fascinating. Another thing that makes it up there is the spooky things. There is a chapter in here with ghouls that is honestly so unsettling. If I'd read this as a kid, like that chapter would have freaked me the hell out. There's a drawing. I'll show you because it's giving me some vibes. Like, also the artwork in here is just, I think, adds to it so much. The aesthetic, I mean, look at this. Look at this. This thing is like just unfucking pleasant. It gives me like real like scary stories to tell in the dark vibes. Honestly, the drawing is a lot more creepier than the chapter, but the chapter is, like what I said, very unsettling. Hearing about how several residents of the graveyard and those buried just outside of its fences adds to the overall eeriness, but I think the scariest part of the book is probably the man Jack, who is the killer who destroyed Bod's biological family and is still hunting for him. Jack is sneaky. Creepy. He's like a hound dog on a scent. He is... There's a part of him that is just the worst, and he keeps sniffing the air in a really unsettling manner. Which, to be completely honest, I was trying to think, while I was writing up my notes on this, I was trying to think, like, why does this image freak me out so much? I was like, it's something. There's something underlying here, which is just really getting to me about this guy and what he's doing. I mean, other than the fact that he just kills people for no reason, like, that's creepy. Like, I was like, there has to be something here that is just getting to me on a visceral level. And I figured it out. It is because that, like, sniffing of the air thing is saying, oh, he smells where this kid is. Like, now, your first thought, especially if you are, maybe if you're my age, definitely if you're younger, you're probably thinking, I don't know, maybe the witches. I know that's something that happened in the older version. I don't know if that's something in the new version, because I haven't watched it. Or you might be thinking, like I said, Hocus Pocus. Mary, how she's like, I smell children. Like, her doing, like, her thing. But there's also a possibility, if you're around my age, or if you're, definitely if you're older than me, you, what might come to mind for you, possibly, is the child snatcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Which, if I ever get a sleep paralysis demon, like, it's gonna look like that bitch. I just know it. He is the worst. Okay, it's editing, Jen of the future. I just want you to know that I hated looking that creep's photo up. Like, I didn't realize, I mean, I knew when I, like, realized why I didn't like Jack and why he was creeping me out, like the man Jack. I didn't realize how much the Candyman, or not the Candyman, the Child Snatcher, excuse me, the Child Snatcher, how much I hated him until I looked up the picture that I just plastered up and had a very visceral reaction. Like, he popped up and I literally, my laptop almost flew off my lap. So if I just reminded you of a childhood nightmare with showing that, I'm sorry. I just needed to share the terror. So, I apologize, and also, you're welcome. So Jack and his, like, his creepy, yucky, sneaky ways and the evil people that he, like, works with and works for, like, they are the scariest part of this book. It made me feel vaguely uneasy the whole way through, getting little hints here and there about this danger waiting in the real world for Bod, and constantly asking, where is this guy? When is he coming back? What is happening? Like, easily the scariest part of this book. Jack makes me feel deeply unsafe. The last thing that really elevated this book for me, that put it up there, is the found family in here, which is one of my absolute favorite tropes. Bod is taken in almost immediately by Mr. and Mrs. Owens. Like, Mrs. Owens basically tells the others in the graveyard that it doesn't matter what anyone says, she will be taking this child into her home. There's like a different story entirely, of course, but like, I got such like Tarzan vibes from that when like Kala adopts like finds and adopts and protects Tarzan as a baby. Like, that's her kid. Almost as soon as she laid eyes on him, like, that's her kid. That's her baby. Don't fuck with that kid. Like, I don't know. That just, it makes my heart so full. And I love Mrs. Owens. Though the Owenses are his parents, and Silas, like his mysterious guardian, brings food for him, looks out for him, is there for advice, teaches him things. The rest of the graveyard are also like really fond of him. A live boy among them is kind of like a novelty thing, but they ruffle his hair and they cheer him up, and the little ones, the little ghost kids that live in the graveyard are there as playmates and best friends with him. The older ones teach him all they know. A lot of it is from their lifetime, so most of it's like really out of date. At one point in here, he's being taught about the humors, which is basically like old-timey medical knowledge about things. It's funny, and also kind of creepy. If you ever look that up, it's really weird. It's incredibly out of date. And they also have him learn the skills of being a spirit. Like I said, the young ones play with him as a little kid, or when he gets a little older, they'll chat with him. They're there for advice and friendship, and at one point he also gets to know this ghost from the Unhallowed Grounds, and their friendship is like one of my favorites in the book. Like I said, found family is just one of my absolute favorite tropes, and I absolutely adore the family and friends that Bod finds in this graveyard. But this is not just about, like, that and life and death among the crumbling stones. Part of life is also going out into the world and facing it head on. Bod has a few encounters with the world outside of the graveyard as he's growing up. Of course, like, what is the point of a coming-of-age story but eventually coming of age, learning lessons, moving forward. There's so many elements of the story that I really love. From the odd but heartwarming characters, to the spooky bits, the humor, the humorous commentary that Gaiman makes, and the delightful like Britishness of this at some points, and ultimately to the bits that give me like all the mushy gushy big time feelings. He is talking to one of the older ghosts in the graveyard, and kind of talking about time, and he's saying how he's like, you know, he's a teenager, and but I feel the same as I always did. And she interrupts him and says, I still feels like I done when I was a tiny slip of a thing making daisy chains in the old pasture. You're always you, and that don't change, and you're always changing, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that just like thing hit home a lot, because like me and my friends were talking about this fairly recently, and it's like, you know, we're you know, getting close to a birthday that we're not particularly looking forward to, but at the same time, it's like you wake up some mornings and you say, what the fuck happened with my back? But a lot of the times you wake up and you're like, damn, I still feel like mentally I am feeling like I'm 22 still. And it's like, but you're not, you damn fool. Take your morning ibuprofen. I don't know, there's a lot in here about growing up as well, how things change once you reach a certain age. Like, there's a restlessness, a feeling like you love your home, but maybe things are getting a little too stagnant or too cramped here for you. There's a whole world that's out there beyond the walls or the front door or the town's limits. There's so much out there that you could explore. There's so many possibilities. And even if you do leave, when you come home, is it still home? I know these are feelings and questions that hit me as I read this book, and I know I cannot be the only one. I left home the year after college because I felt like I needed to get out. I needed a new place where basically almost no one knew me. I say almost no one because I moved to a town down here to be near a few friends. So it wasn't like I was going out into the great beyond all by myself. I was moving with a purpose, but I liked the fact that I was going somewhere that I knew my friends, but I wasn't going to walk into a supermarket and bump into someone that bullied me in the first grade or someone who knew my family. I liked the possibilities of that, the anonymity. I liked being in a place where it felt like I could breathe better. Going home felt extremely weird in the beginning, and sometimes it still feels weird. It's nice, like I love going back to my hometown in Vermont because the pace of it is so different than it is where I currently live in Massachusetts, and I do love it, and I love seeing the old familiar places and spending time with people. But it feels weird. It's almost like feeling like you don't really belong anywhere. Like, you know this place and you love it a whole bunch, but it's just not the same anymore, and where you're now living, it still doesn't feel like home. Honestly, I've been in like my current town for like the past, I want to say, I think like 8 years maybe, and it doesn't feel like I belong still. I mean, I've got a home and I've got loved ones here and like farther away and stuff, but there's not like that feeling, like that ultimate belonging feeling, and I kind of wonder if that's just not a thing that exists once you leave home for the first time, if that's just forever gone. Or what. So this book brought up like a lot of questions for me about that. What is belonging? Where is home? Questions about life and even what happens afterwards, which frankly is not something I like spending time pondering because that's a topic that haunts some of my panicked thoughts at 3 a.m. But there's something ultimately comforting in this creepy little book. There's a hopefulness, and there's also something darkly comforting about the ghosts who spend their afterlife in this graveyard. One of my favorite chapters is called Danse Macabre, which is also a pretty awesome piece of classical music. There's an old video here on YouTube that I remember us being shown in music class when we were kids. I'll leave a link down below if you're interested. I imagine maybe Neil Gaiman listened to this on repeat while he was writing that chapter, but I don't know for sure, because that's not something that was in like the information at the back of the book, but I could totally see him listening to like Saint Song on repeat while writing that chapter. Yeah, it's a cool piece of music, so check it out. Like I said, I'll leave a link down below. But anyway, I love this. I would love to share the ending paragraph because it likewise like ripped me open and then put me back together again. But that's more spoilerish. So instead I'll leave you with let me see, this quote by Baud's guardian Silas. Silas said, "Out there, the man who killed your family is, I believe, still looking for you, still intends to kill you." Baud shrugged. "So?" he said. "It's only death. I mean, all of my best friends are dead." "Yes," Silas hesitated. "They are. And they are, for the most part, done with the world. You are not. You're alive, Baud. That means you have infinite potential. You can do anything, make anything, dream anything. If you change the world will change. Potential. Once you're dead, it's gone. Over. You've made what you've made, dreamed your dream, written your name. You may be buried here. You may even walk. But that potential is finished." I came for the spooky, stayed for the quirky ghosts and the mystery, and it became a favorite with the found family. If you like the unsettling eeriness of Coraline and the melancholia with dashes of wisdom and heart like ocean at the end of the lane, I think that you would probably really enjoy the Graveyard Book. So yeah, that's it, guys. These are my favorite horror books of all time. 3 of my 12 all-time favorite books ever. I know that this was incredibly long. This is going to be quite awful. to edit. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. I feel like I overshared a lot again, so I'm sorry if like some of it is like details that you guys are like, what the fuck do I care about you saying these things? But I was trying to really get down to what makes these my all-time favorite books, and I can't possibly do that without relating them to parts of myself or my makeup, my history, basically, as to why they are favorites. Because honestly, I don't know if I'd read these at other points in my life, maybe they wouldn't have been all-time favorites. So I don't know. Books are kind of funny like that. Like I said, the first time I read this was in college, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't an all-time favorite until I reread it years later. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you've ever read these books before. Let me know if I've made them sound interesting to you. And yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.